welcome back to another episode of New Steeple.
Same people.
This is a podcast where we talk to you about why we do church and kind of how we do it and give you a little bit of a background into all the nuts and bolts, right?
That's right.
We've
got a new person with us today.
That's right. And this is the guy that makes it all happen right here. It's Greg Janes. He's our director of digital outreach. He's a guy who makes us look good. And so I just want you to introduce yourself. Tell us kind of who you are, what you do.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on y'all's podcast. I'm normally behind on the other side,
That's
so
right.
I'm not opposed to being in front of it, but I'm normally behind it. But so, like you said, I'm Greg Janes, and I actually have a video production company called Mix It Up Media. But I have been attending Johnson Street since I came here I graduated high school in 2009 and went through the campus center and everything, and have always been involved and found my passion for media and everything, and then did my own business. But then I started incorporating that with how can I help Johnson Street out. And so quick story, over the last 4 or 5 years, started doing more work and kind of coming on and kind of helping with, I guess, media, if we want to bundle that in.
Right.
Sometimes stuff gets into that I don't actually do, but a lot of the design and camera work and photos and social media and stuff like that, that's a passion, and I feel like a talent that I have, and I wanted to be able to use that for the kingdom. And so I was blessed to be able to help Johnson Street over the last several years and continue that. So.
Yeah, you've got a great eye for things, and you've got a way of helping us tell the story that I think has really helped us over the last several years. So we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate it.
And so in our last episode, we talked about, crafting, putting together a worship service. And so we thought it would be good to maybe go even a little bit further today and talk about, creating a whole atmosphere or, kind of an environment that is conducive to connecting people with God.
Yeah, and this is something that it may be more subliminal unless you're paying attention, but some things are a little bit more obvious, like, one particular service a while back, we lowered the lights in the middle of one of our songs, and it stayed lower just a little too long to where people started to get uncomfortable. And afterwards, I had some people say, so why were the lights down for so long? And really what I found out is that people just want to know why. And granted, we may not know why we do some of the things, but when it comes to our environment here, there's a lot of thought that goes into that. So that's what I thought we could talk about today is the environment of our worship service. So I wanted to talk quickly about the fact that whenever right before COVID hit, we wanted to change a little bit of our auditorium. We used to have a multi-level stage. Were you here whenever that was here?
I think I came and interviewed when it was like that.
Okay.
But then it changed like a week after we moved here.
Right. So the original setup was basically it was kind of even, I think, with the wall, and there was just one little area where people would walk up these stairs and they would be doing their sermon, singing, and communion. You had two big podiums there. One was the communion podium, and one was the worship and the sermon podium. And then several years later, they added a little section, and then they even added a little stair kind of section that jutted out.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to do a lot of things whenever your stage isn't flexible. So we are growing with our young families, and we wanted a place where our kids could, do plays and do some fun things. So we basically ripped it all out and put a flat level stage on there, and then COVID hit,
Right.
which was kind of, I don't know if that was good planning on our part, but we had a lot more space
Right.
to do some fun things. So when y'all saw that, when it comes to kind of crafting the service, crafting the environment, what is some of the things that you saw, and how was it like? Great. There's a great big space to do some things with, or what? What were y'all seeing?
For me, I kind of got thrown in here right as COVID hit, and we were very fortunate in the fact that Johnson Street had already been live streaming maybe a year or two
Yeah.
before COVID even happened. So we were kind of ready to go with that when people were, had to stay in their homes. But we did want to kind of create this environment when they were only watching on their TVs or on their phones or computers, to where they could have more connection with people and feel like the screen was just kind of an extension of their own home. So we tried some different things. I think we started with, we had some like white pillars, boxes that we could manipulate and stack in different arrangements and have lights in them. And I think that was even planned before COVID even happened.
Yeah, and this is where Greg really kind of came in. And when you saw kind of what we had to deal with, and since you were kind of really one of the people in charge of our streaming, what did you see and what were you wanting to do?
So, first off, like before this, like there is like creative and design that like I want to help with, but also I strongly believe that it is how am I saying? God is creative, and He has designed things in nature for us to experience Him and His Spirit and everything. And so God is the ultimate creative being that we have, and so He's created stuff to better experience Him and everything. And so I think that can be put into how we design a stage, how we design our live streams and everything. I don't think that's just a human element. I think that is found in how we are designed as humans from the very start. So let me preface with that. But that big open space allowed us to imagine how can we get people more involved with worship, and how can we make this almost a reflection of what our lives are outside of this building. And so kind of fast forwarding a little bit real quickly, we had, there were some events happening in the world, and so we wanted to have a prayer night and discussion night with several different ministers around our city of San Angelo. And so we invited them, but we didn't want them to just come up and talk straight from the podium and just be like speaking almost not necessarily down, but like at people. We wanted this to be a place to have conversation and everything. And so we're like, where does conversation happen? It happens in the living room. So let's put some couches up there. Let's put some chairs, different stuff. And so we provided that opportunity, put some, lamps and everything to make it living room feeling. And that night was a huge success. We had a lot of great feedback the audience felt really engaged. They felt like they were part of the conversation because of that environment that we had created. And so we just kind of continued to roll with that and think like, hey, this kind of fits our natural environment a little bit better. Just with, if you visited our church in person, you know that like, it's white, it has big pillars, a lot of crown molding and
Pretty
stuff.
industrial, institutional.
Yeah. Right. And so like the white boxes and the lights like kind of was jarring a little bit. They were awesome, but we were trying to figure out like how do we incorporate this? But like we started putting furniture in there and it kind of fit living room theme. And then so we kind of started thinking like, well, we want to encourage people to have these conversations and this dialogue, not just in church or in Sunday morning classes, but to feel like these conversations need to be happening in the places where we spend most of our time, and that's the living room. And so there was rhyme and reason and thought process behind that to maybe subconsciously every Sunday for people to feel comfortable by seeing couches and chairs up there to be like, hey, we can have these conversations in our living room, and everything like that.
Yeah.
And they're functional too, in that one thing that we'll talk about maybe in a minute is, having our praise team on stage. Now the praise team could just, sit there when they're not singing instead of having to take time to, walk across that big long stage and exit and then come back up later. So they serve multiple purposes for sure. Yeah.
So right now we've got kind of a living room set on stage. It's still not huge. It's not a big space. It's encompassing a smaller space of the larger space. I remember whenever we got lights in the back on the walls, we had some, some of our members were just saying, what are these? What's happening? This is now a production. And I'm like, it's always been a production. We're producing something for God here. But, the lights give us texture, and we can change colors and it gives us different feels for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it plays into, like, just think about, like, things that, like, again, I'm going to go back to, like, what God creates. Like, he made trees green for a reason. He made the sun yellowish and stuff for like, it gives you different vibes and different feelings, and it naturally comes in and affects our emotions and the way we think. And so, like, that's, like, you can prove that, like, colors do that. And so there is aesthetic design, but then it helps transition us to the theme or the vibe that we're wanting to, feel that day with your songs and your sermon and everything to help transition that. So, like, for one instance, like when we have our kids' time, we put more of the rainbow, brighter colors and stuff, because that helps us think and get into the mind of, like, okay, this isn't necessarily a, like, in-depth serious topic. This is going to be a little bit more fun, playful, and it transitions our minds to then flip to the next page and be like, okay, this is kids' time. This is where we're going to be with our children or the children sitting next to us and stuff. And so
it's very subtle.
Right. But it helps our mind to be able to get into that moment that we need to be in to fully experience what the Spirit's about to reveal to us.
Yeah, and one other change that we made that was interesting, that I kind of pulled the trigger on, so you can blame me, was our baptistry. And if you notice, our baptistry now, it's got a nice stone wall to it, and there's lights back there, and sometimes you'll see whenever someone is baptized, whenever they come out of the water, the lights will turn to white. It's very subtle, that you'll see. But I remember whenever I first came here, there was a very small opening for the baptistry and a very large red curtain. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I didn't see that.
And the very last time, I've been noticing the motor on the curtain had been struggling. And I remember the very last time it happened, they were up there and the curtain went like this far. And so they were having to stick their head out to talk. And I told, one of our guys on staff, I said, oh no, this can't happen. So I thought, why is our opening so narrow if baptism is one thing that we hold so dear? So we widened it out and made it a centerpiece and focus. So, that's one of the reasons why we did that, but we incorporate the lights in there, and I think it's kind of cool.
Right.
Whenever it works out. And
so, like, little side note, like, this isn't just, like, new stuff, like, within the last year we've done. Like, stages are raised because, like, when churches originally were happening, they were getting so big and like, people in the back couldn't see the person talking. Mm-hmm. So they made the decision to build a platform or a stage so that the people in the back or wherever you're sitting could hear them and see them. And so they did that to accommodate and to be able to make everybody who's attending be able to hear and be part of the service and draw them in. And it wasn't like, oh, we don't need to do that. Like, they were like, okay, that makes sense. Let's do that. So, like, from the very early on, like, the stage was a representation of, like, setting the place for people to, like, view and take in what is being said.
So Jeff, I want to talk about praise here in a second, but I remember some of those early videos that we took, the early streams of our church, was just a single person with a blank white wall behind them, and all you could hear is that person. And I remember thinking, man, if we're going to be doing this every Sunday and our audience is going to be watching, we're going to need to up that a little bit. And I remember we had conversations about what that would look like. So talk a little bit about why we decided to go ahead and have more people on stage.
When COVID hit and we were confined to our homes, that was an interesting time to have worship services. Mm-hmm. We'd bring a skeleton crew up and sometimes we'd pre-record it, like on a Friday or Saturday, and sometimes we would do it live. But yeah, when it's just one person up on this big empty stage, it can just feel a little dead, and like I'm not really connected, and so
Two-dimensional.
yeah,
That's what I see.
so having and I mean the Bible tells us to speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. We're supposed to sing to each other, and so normally when it's just one song leader up there, it's almost like everybody singing to him and him singing to everybody. If I would love to get our pews and get rid of them and turn our get chairs in there and turn everybody aside so we can actually see each other. So we're not just singing to the back of people's heads. But having 4 or 5, 8 people up to help lead that time of worship and singing, we just wanted people at home to really feel like, oh, there's more people here involved than just me and one other person.
And that's something that we were not used to. So, whenever we kind of gathered back, we even had some folks were concerned, because typically, Churches of Christ we're not really into any type of a formal presentational music like a solo or even a choir. It's really because we want everyone to be involved. Mm-hmm. And so some of our thinking may lead us to a place where, are the people on stage, are they just performing to us? And what I would say is no. I mean, we're all together.
Yeah, and our heritage and our tradition is singing a cappella with multiple voice parts. And so why not have somebody leading each one of those parts?
Right.
And having a female soprano lead the female sopranos in the room so they can hear their part and be able to sing along.
And when you see it now, you see multiple people, and it really has a whole different feel. And in what you do, has that been helpful to the look? And I mean, is that difficult to mix and all that?
I think it's been very helpful to just see different age groups, different ethnicities, different genders represented on stage.
Yeah, because that's who we are.
Right. And so that a lot of times, unless we're able to see people that look like us or act like us or represent us, then we're a little hesitant to feel like we're included or that we can do that. We kind of need to see somebody take that role first. And so that allows that to be able to encourage that to happen and for people to be like, hey, I could do this, or I could be a part of this church. Not necessarily to be on praise team, but they could be like, oh, there's a 25-year-old up there that's in college that's helping with this. Okay, this person goes there. I feel like they have a group that might include me or welcome me in this church, or a 65-year-old, or whatever that looks like. It allows that opportunity. So that's a little not necessarily what we're talking about, but it kind of fits.
Well, that's part of the environment,
though,
I think. I mean, we want an environment that kind of reflects, a little bit of who we are, but also reflects a lot of God's glory and kind of, we can't look at God as this stuffy being who just wants it. He created a lot of different things, and he still I believe enjoys it whenever his children, think a little bit creatively and differently, and to see an environment that is inclusive of everybody you just mentioned. I think it speaks a lot to who we are, and it lets people know that, hey, we're here for one another. We're open and available and accessible, and that's what I see. And I think that's what you guys try to do whenever you're looking into what it looks like on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, and we all know that our world has changed, and the decisions we were making at first, as far as the way we look on a live stream, may have been geared more towards just our members who are all confined to their homes, but live streaming is not going anywhere, and so we want to continue to put our best foot forward and including those people who are at home and making them feel a part, and so there may be things that happen in the room that may not be specifically for the people in the room. But they need the understanding that, hey, this is for our members or our visitors who are joining us online.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one thing that we have kind of transitioned to saying here since 2020 and COVID and doing like all that was kind of emphasizing you're all part of the family, no matter if you're here or at home. Right. And so we don't want to just make the person sitting in the pew comfortable and invited to that space, but people that are viewing it that may not ever get a chance to step foot in our building. For example, we may have, or not we do have people that are firefighters or paramedics or nurses or doctors or police officers that have positions or jobs that physically cannot be here Sunday mornings. And so they may have to watch our service delayed, right, or at a different time during the week because they are working during that time, and they may not have the opportunity or the choice to switch their time of work. And I'm very thankful for the work and their service that they do. And so let's meet them where they are, right, because if I was in a car wreck on Sunday, I would hope that those people would be there to be able to help take care of me. So there is that scenario. And then there's scenarios of people just being older, or they might be sick, or they might be handicapped, and they can't get out and physically come to our buildings. So why would we then just say like, oh, we're not going to provide a way for you to experience this? And we've kind of made ways for them to experience it by doing like cassette tapes or like CDs. So we were doing it before, but we just added visual element of video to it. And so I was like, well, we've been doing this. We just added a different element to it, a different medium to it. And then the next example is people that may not even live in our town. They might be traveling, or they might live in a different state, or even a different country, like the Kids for Katali. Yeah. They watch because they feel like they're part of our family, and it would be great if they're able to step foot in our building. We could actually hug them, but most likely they're probably not going to be able to, unfortunately. But they're still part of our family, and they might not have a church that they're able to be part of over in Kenya, but they can say like, hey, I'm part of a church. I'm part of Johnson Street. And that's the beauty of it, and I think it's speaking into God's whole plan for everybody to be a family. This is allowing us to have that opportunity to expand and grow our family outside of just these walls that we have.
Yeah, really, it is all about kind of shifting our thinking into a more proactive way of being. Definitely. Because if you look at the early American movement, the West was the frontier, and when the frontier expanded, so did churches. The gospel followed the frontier, and I kind of look at the online world as almost this new frontier, and we don't have to go anywhere to reach them. We just have to, I think, plan a little bit and do everything we can on this end to try to make sure that whatever that experience is, that people are seeing us for who we really are as much as they can without being here, but seeing us for who we really are, and really hopefully through that environment they're going to see our message.
And we're definitely not perfect at it. We're still learning and growing, and I still get emails on a regular basis of, I couldn't hear so-and-so this week online and things like that. So, we're still working it out, but I think it's important for us to keep working it out.
Yeah, so if in the future you start seeing some things that may not necessarily be normal, typical, something you're accustomed to, maybe the lights go down for a particular song or two. Maybe, I'm juggling fire on stage or something. No, whatever we're doing, whatever is different, the first thought should be, oh, I wonder who we're trying to reach today. Instead of, man, what's happening? Why is it so different? Right? Because there's always a reason of why we do some of the things that we do. Normally, there's always a reason. Right. Any last things that you'd like to say?
No, not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, Greg, any words of wisdom to kind of usher us out here?
Words Words of wisdom? Oh, man. No, but I just want to re-emphasize, like, God is creative. Like, that's, like, we open the Bible and he says, in the beginning, God created. Like, it's, like, one of the first words he says is created. And so, like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's what, hopefully we've been able to dive into that a little bit into here. And it's not, we're not just bringing in creativity to just bring in creativity. We're bringing it in for a purpose, and to help people of all types of backgrounds, ethnicities, genders, to be able to experience the wonderful love of God. And that's been going on. If you think about it in your past, if you've attended church, if you really sit down and dive in, like, it's been happening for years, decades. You just might be figuring out these new things because they might be sudden jumps of changes, of adding live stream and video cameras and photos and social media. Like, it's all new, but we've been doing it in different forms for years.
That's right.
And it's just a way to, again, connect and share and tell stories. Jesus was a storyteller. I mean, that's what we're reading in the Bible, is we're reading a bunch of true stories and stories that Jesus shared with his disciples and followers and everybody. He was telling stories, and he set them up with saying what the scene looked like and who was there, and that helped people really understand what he was talking about. And that's kind of what we're doing. So
yeah, and Paul talks about becoming all things to all men so that he might save some. I mean, there's a reason that we want to find an engaging atmosphere, because we don't know who's coming in on Sunday morning. And so we got to do everything we can to try to meet that person where they are. So I really appreciate you being here, Greg.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for listening. I'm Scott. And that's...
I'm Jeff.
There you go. And we hope to see you next time on New Steeple.
Same people.
Bye.